Well, good morning. Good to see you folks again. While we're waiting to get some of Brianna's numbers back and things, I thought we could take a few minutes and talk about the Innovation Board bill that we have. And we had Julie Moore, the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources, in last week, and we heard back from her. I think I got this yesterday or the day, maybe it was, no, I think it was Tuesday, with some suggestive changes to the makeup. And so I wanted you folks to see that and thought we could discuss that a little bit while we're waiting for the numbers to come back on our other issue. So Linda will forward that to you, and I'll give you a few minutes or a couple of minutes to look it over. So you had an opportunity to look that over. So she made some changes at the top, and would advise setting up two advisory panels to work along, but leave I guess the board in charge. And Brian?
Sorry, I don't have the other bill in front of me, but it seemed like there were 13 or 14 people originally on that other board. Is that what I'm remembering?
Yeah, I believe it was 14.
Okay, so this obviously diminishes that number to 6, which I think is a good number. And yet she's leaving open the possibility that with 2 panels, and I guess are those the other people that she's bulleted there? Those were the original people from the more extended list. I'm trying to get my arms around what she did here. It looks like
yeah, the first bill, or what the House sent us, is, it's got way too many people in it to really sit around a table and try to come to a conclusion. I thought was overwhelming and certainly way too many. Like most supervisory union school districts, they have an executive committee from the full board. The executive committee does, 2/3 of the work, and then they have smaller groups at work that present to, the executive committee, and basically this would be set up. So if you had the panels broke up into two different groups, you'd end up with 6 or so on each one of those panels, which, if somebody missed, you'd still have 5. And you'd probably get to a conclusion quicker and easier than if you had a room full of people.
Yep. I still see somebody that's an organic farmer, but I don't see a dairy farmer. I see someone from the public representing the dairy industry. I still think if we're going to have somebody that practices organic agriculture, I think we need to have somebody that practices conventional dairy.
Well, would you take that member representing the dairy industry and take out public?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Any comment on that suggestion?
You must agree then.
Well, either that or they lost their tongue while we were on break. I doubt
I
that.
mean, I don't feel strongly about it. I guess I'd like to understand why they didn't do this. It seems fairly deliberate.
I don't know either.
There are,
Carrie's going to be in with us. Is it tomorrow, Bobby, on this, or Friday?
What's that, Brian?
Isn't Carrie coming in to talk to us about this bill again?
Yeah, yes, and I haven't got my schedule.
I think it's tomorrow. We could ask him tomorrow, Chris.
He's scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9.
According to Julie, she thought that Carrie would agree to this, but
Right.
it's best to hear it directly from him. Any other suggestions before we?
Well, I think that it's a lot of these people that are being either on the board or advisory committees are related to agriculture, which of course it's fine. We're all for agriculture, but it's partly to take the place of the Pesticide Advisory Council. And one of the things about that council is it was supposed to have people who were concerned with the human health effects of pesticides. I mean, I don't think when we're talking about pesticides, we're not just talking about agriculture, we're talking about all those rights of way and other uses of pesticides in forestry and whatnot that have bad effects. So I think there needs to be more thought put into bringing on people. I don't see anybody here necessarily. I'm just skimming it, of course, and I haven't digested it all, but I don't see anybody talking about necessarily human health. There's a commissioner of health or designee, but that's, pretty slim ability to deal with health issues. I don't know. I think that there needs to be more of it. I hate to say this, but I think there needs to be less about agriculture and more about human health in terms of expertise on the board.
So that would be up at the top, where we've got the board would be Ag, the Secretary of Ag, Secretary of Natural Resources, UVM Center for Sustainable Ag, Environmental Advocacy Group, member of the farming community. There isn't anybody up there that's actually on human health, Anthony, at the top.
Right.
And I would think that's where you would want a person, if we were gonna do a health person, maybe up there.
I think so. That's my personal opinion.
But didn't Carrie say that they had somebody from the health agency on the committee now, but they never show up? Wasn't there some talk about that?
Yeah, I remember something about that. I think the whole pesticide advisory committee had been kind of become dormant in a way.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do here is to revitalize the whole idea about trying to take on these issues. So even though the person wasn't showing up to the old board, I don't necessarily think that would be the case in this new one.
Well, which one of those up in the top 6? Or would you want to have a board made up of 7, so it's not an even number?
Yeah, I think
that
that's a
way you don't
good
get
idea.
towers. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Put the health commissioner right up on the top. That makes 7.
Health commissioner or designee?
Yeah.
Or someone who deals with human health.
So are there other changes at the bottom of that group down there that you would you'd want to delete or add to?
No, I think the rest of it looks okay. I mean, this is the first time I've seen it, so I haven't had a chance to think about it. But to me, it looks like she's taken what at one time was a 14-member board and just taken some of them and made, panels instead.
Out of that big crew, and then set a board up of the professional up at the top.
I mean, I think it'd be nice to have a dairy representative in the group, but
At the bottom,
no, at the bottom, they have a dairy representative. But they would draw from the following, so it's not guaranteed anybody from dairy would be on the group.
well, a member of the farming community is at number 5, Corey.
Yeah, but that could be a vegetable farmer, not a dairy farmer. And
Well,
it could be a small farmer. It could be a small organic, not that I'm saying they're bad, but I'm assuming a farmer like David Zuckerman looks at things a lot different than a farmer like Harold Horrigan. You know what I mean? So it's a broad.
I think they think along the same lines.
I just think, so I know having maybe 2 members from the farming community, I'm not looking to give anyone more say over the other. I'm just saying, make sure we're well represented.
Who's we?
Dairy farmers. I represent the largest dairy county in New England.
No, I
He
didn't
farm-
think you were a dairy farmer. So when you said we, I wanted to make clear.
Well, he's a
They
milker.
hire me, Chris.
Parents a milker.
He's
Yeah.
milking something.
You can add in what? You want us to send you that privately?
Yeah. Keep
I
that one
also
off
think that
YouTube.
in general, I think we're talking about, this is called the Ag Innovation Board, and I think we need to try to do our best to make sure that it represents people who are innovative, not just the old guard, because part of what we're looking at is how to move forward with a different kind of perspective, I think, given the fact that the one we have, the perspective we have needs some retuning.
I mean, I think a lot of those guys are being innovative. I mean, I've got a dairy farm up here that has mostly robots doing their milking. That's innovative. So
Well, we
again,
had
it
that.
depends on.
We had that young girl from your district, that took their small farm, put beef in, sheep, and
Yep.
and ran into a hornet's nest down in Montpelier trying to get into the farmer markets. The Hall, I think it was one of the Hall girls, one of Richard's daughter, I think.
Yep.
Um,
I'll just be clear and say less labor and more robotics is not the innovation that I hope the state will be promoting. It is an example of innovation, but from where I sit, it's very hard to talk about this conceptually. I wonder if we could ask to have the current board, just a side by side, the current board, what the House passed and what Secretary Moore is asking for, and help inform our conversation. I'm a bit distracted this morning, and just thinking about it without being able to look at it is tricky.
yeah, tomorrow we can have Carrie bring, I think we have a copy of that, Linda does. Anyways, but we can tell Carrie that we want to look at both the old and the new and how he perceives the new working differently or better, but Linda, would you want to make sure that Carrie brings a copy of who's on the board, the makeup of the board, and who's there, and tell him we'd like to hear how he perceives this new board working compared to the old board or vice versa.
Sure, I'll do that.
Well, there is one more on the back side of that, the bottom list on the back page. There's representative from an environmental advocacy organization. So, yeah.
Well, wait a
So
minute. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's down there twice then. Up top, there's one that says number 4, representative from an environmental advocacy organization. And
That's
down below, it says the same thing again.
That's sitting on the board is up above, right? And then
Yeah.
down below is they would work on the advisory panels. There'd be 2 of them. And I don't know if they're divided up there or not, but the bottom group is just a panel that suggests things to the board. That's the way I take it.
Yeah, no, I understood that, but I didn't know why there were 2 of them.
Well, there's 2 of everything when you look at it that way. The people at the list on the bottom is potential people that would be areas that would be drawn from for these advisory groups. I mean, because you got the Secretary of Agriculture or designee, Secretary of Natural Resources or designee on both the top and the bottom as well.
All right.
You
Yep.
can certainly argue that if you're looking for innovation, I mean, asking the people already in charge to come up with innovation is questionable to begin with, I think, if you want to be real about it.
Well, maybe we ought to have Julie in and take a look at this bill again.
We didn't have her on the list for tomorrow morning, right, Linda?
No, she's not.
It's not, right.
But tomorrow morning, we've got to do something with our previous bill that we're talking about today. I don't know how much time we're going to have to devote to this thing tomorrow. So did you think any more about our school meals proposal and where you'd like to go with that while had your breakfast break?
I think we
Well-
need to talk to other people myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll, I think yeah, I think Jane thought that we could use that Dr. Dinosaur system actually very easily. And of course, that if we tried that, it would, as Rosie was saying, it was gonna really mess things up for her trying to figure out how to make it work.
And I think that Faye was not in favor of it either, Bobby, because it still leaves that situation where there's a stigma attached for both meals now. I mean, that doesn't alleviate that problem.
No,
So, and I don't know what the difference in money was gonna be anyway, but I don't know.
oh, I think somebody's been doing some work on that from Joint Fiscal. She said they've run some numbers, and so it had to be Jane was asking them to run some numbers, I would presume.
Well, and I asked Nolan to figure out the universe last night, so maybe he was talking to Brianna. But
Oh,
there's a central question that I still don't understand. In Sarah Kitchell's idea, is she imagining the general fund will pay for these kids? Because if that's true, then we should argue about whether or not we want to use that money. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but one of the tensions is the difference between the general fund and the ed fund and this program, and where it all falls.
Yeah, I understood that it would come from the general fund if it's gonna come from Dr. Dinosaur.
yeah, that's where that money comes from. I didn't ask her directly that question. And, but
Well, I
I
mean-
still say it should be a school function. It should, I mean, I don't agree with, I think to get a true cost of what the heck we're paying, Bum, come here. My cat wants to go out and she can't go out unless I go with her.
What's her name?
Bum,
Bum Bum?
yeah. BUMIN. My little nephew
name.
named her that one day. Well, he kept hollering to her and it's all he could say is mum or bum bum. And so we got our name changed from Mindy to Bum Bum.
Thank goodness this is all on YouTube.
But you know, like the retirement stuff and a lot of that comes out of the general fund. It should be out of the ed fund. How do we know what it's really costing when you've got all these different pots of money that are paying for different parts of the system? And you know,
It was designed that way.
Pardon?
It was designed that way. No one wants to know how much it all costs.
Well, I don't know. You can trick yourself at home and do that, but when you're dealing with public money, you should be able to spend it so you can keep track of it and explain to your taxpayers, well, this is what we're spending this money for, and it's this much, Chris.
Well, maybe this afternoon you'd have the chance to talk to Senator Kitchell and find out if she really means that she imagines we could have 10 to 14 million dollars of general fund under her vision for this. Then why don't we take that money and set it up and say the first, X schools that come in this year, you'll get a grant, and next year, you know what I mean? we need to understand if there really is access to general fund dollars. I agree with you. That's not how we should do it. But I just want to have this bill advanced. And if that's something that Senator Kitchell is comfortable with, we ought to understand that and work it into the framework.
So does that go back to what we talked about? One way of phasing it in is by limiting the number of people, the number of school districts that could come in the first year or two, whatever, is phase it in that way.
Bum agrees.
I'm bummed. You gotta be quiet or I'm gonna have to put your muzzle on you. She doesn't mind either, the cat. Well, if it was a first come, first served basis, then, I mean, and you capped it out at a certain amount, I would think that would make sense, so it wouldn't run away from us. You know, schools that want to move in that direction, should we have it? See, her big issue is that there's some children that hot lunch is not a problem for. And, you know, she uses herself as an example. When her son went to school, you know, it wasn't an issue, and didn't really think that we should be, with times the way they are and money being short, that we shouldn't be spending money to feed children that don't need help or people that don't need help. We should be spending it on, you know, on the needy and the people that it really makes a difference for. And I think that's why she came up with that, boy, it's fun being here alone. The phone ring, bum.
You've got too much going on, Bobby.
Well, my wife's gone away, or she'd be babysitting the cat and answering the phone in the other room. But I think that's why Jane came up with the idea, maybe you could use Dr. Dinosaur, because that ends at a high level, but you've got to have quite a few dependents to reach that cap. But if we capped it out, if she would agree to go up to I still say that damn money ought to come right out of the ed fund, and that way the towns that are having a harder time with, you know, it's a fairness issue, and if they're having a hard time raising money, well, they get more state aid. If they are a wealthy town and don't need the help, well, then they, you know, everybody pays according to their ability to pay, whether, you know, with their income sensitivity thing. So districts that can afford to pay a little more do, and the poorer towns get a little less. And that's the way, you know, 46 and 60 and 46 and today works, Brian.
So Jane's plan would have included both breakfast and lunch, but it would have capped it at a family income of 133K.
Yeah.
With, I think you said 8 people in the household. So, I mean, I guess I could support that too, because it's better than what we have now. But I don't think either of the advocates, well, I'm not saying that Rosie's an advocate. I don't think either Rosie or Faye were 100% in favor of that for different reasons. Rosie had a lot of administrative work to do if we did it, and Faye doesn't think it takes away that stigma. So I don't know, Bobby. I really don't know where we are.
But you would think that, I don't know how they run their free meals and reduced meals or even universal meals. See, nobody gets anything. But schools that do reduced and free, once, do they have to, what the heck does a student do when they get to a school that doesn't have universal meals and they have free lunch? Do they have to present a certain card? I mean, or is it all automatically done through the school system
I
somehow?
have no idea.
Well, this has been the central data collection point. The administrators struggle to collect income data so that they can draw down maximum federal dollars, but they don't have to, and not every kid, not every parent submits that, but that's one of the bureaucratic challenges here that is frankly getting in our way of feeding kids.
Yeah, but what Bobby's asking, when the kid's in line at the lunch counter, do they have to
But-
show a card? Or do
No,
they
there's
just-
when there's a universal meal, there's no line.
Oh, I know that, but with free and reduced,
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
they do. Okay.
Well, and a lot of times it's just a code. So their neighbors in line with them don't know. And then the back end processes says, oh, Charlie is free and reduced, so we don't actually bill him, but Ted is not, and so we have to bill his parents. Remember, we've had administrators tell us that they spend a bunch of time at the end of the year and into June
Right.
and July chasing down 15 grand of back owed lunch debts. And the legislature, at least once in my memory, has handed out money to schools to forgive that
To-
because it's
To
bureaucratic
cover
pain. It's just a pain. It's not a good use of our education time. But anyway, yeah. So that is true that the stigma in that sense has been sort of handled, except that not every school does that. Some, I think, are still bringing cash.
So if every child is given a code, a number, PIN number, who the heck knows if it's a free code or a pay code?
That's true. They don't. What we heard from Scott in Essex has to do with what they access, though. It's not, the kids paying cash can go to the a la carte place. The kids who are on free and reduced have to go through the lunch line, as it were. So there's some of those dynamics. But to me, those are not the point. The point is the kids that we're just missing, the kids that, their parents aren't dealing, or somebody lost a job and so their income situation has changed pretty dramatically, and the meal system is already, cranking along and they're not getting free reduced. There's all those sorts of slipping through the cracks problems that any means test that we create will continue to miss those, I think.
Yeah, and I'd push back on Essex too when they said whether it was a la carte or the other pieces. I mean, I remember being in middle school, believe it or not, I was 5'10", 165 pounds. When I'd get the middle school meal, it wouldn't feed me enough. So I was either buying 2 meals or buying a thing every day. So you also have to, not limit that piece to some kids.
Yeah, but being free, it didn't really matter, did it?
Well, mine was never free, but they wouldn't give you 2 meals for free. Like they'd only give you I just remember like chicken nugget day, you'd get 5 chicken nuggets and a handful of fries. And I just remember being like, when you're 5'10", 165 pounds, that doesn't feed you.
Not too good.
No.
That's heck going home from school hungry.
Yeah.
Well,
Brianna's back
we-
with us, Bobby.
yeah, Brianna's back. You did well, Brianna.
Thank
Um,
you.
Very well. How'd you come out with your numbers?
All right. So I did run some analysis for you here, and I have come up with a new breakfast cost range to be between $6 and $10 million. And this is for the students that don't already have access to breakfast through an existing universal school meal program. And this also assumes that we'll maintain the average free and reduced price meals of about 40% of students having that. This also includes all of the federal aid that's provided through the school breakfast program, which reduces the meal cost by about 32 cents. So that's included in this also, as well as the Vermont contribution that's already in existence, which is 30 cents per meal. So I captured all of that. And then once again, just the range is resulting from the low end being 60% participation in the average kind of universal school meal program that we see in the data. And then the high end range just being all the students participating. So that's what goes into there. Yes.
Yeah, Chris?
Thank you. Brianna, you said something about 40%. You continue to assume that 40% something. What, say that again, would you?
Absolutely. So the 40% is for the free and reduced price students. So those are the students that qualify for that program, which is the 185% of the federal poverty line.
And so you're assuming 40% of the kids eating breakfast are qualified through free and reduced?
Yes.
But isn't tier 1 says that if you have 40% of your school population getting free and reduced lunch, you can have free and reduced, you can have universal meals that the feds cover. So what am I missing? We would have all schools doing that if we were really at 40%. So help me understand that.
Absolutely. So that is looking at the statewide average. And so some schools have a student body that has, 60% of students on the free and reduced price or 75%. And those are all the students. All of those schools are currently operating with the community eligibility provision. But on the other hand, there's some schools that only have 10 or 20% of their students on the free and reduced price. So this is looking at the statewide average to do this calculation.
Well, so this comes back to a question we asked Rosie last year. Are we limiting, are we drawing the right circle? I mean, if Brianna's estimate is that 40% of Vermont kids qualify for free and reduced lunch, isn't there some way we can, we talked about, remember we talked about Winooski and Colchester pairing up or something, creative boundaries that get us to the community rating. And maybe you said that wasn't possible, but I don't understand why. If that is the assumption, that's based on data, then we must be missing something.
You got an answer to that?
Yeah, and Rosie's back on also. So for community, so for schools to be able to use the community eligibility provision, that's where that 40%, but it's 40% of students who are directly certified for school meals, not 40% of students who are eligible for free or reduced price meals based on the data from Brianna. So it's a different number, and schools have done all of the merging and matching up that really makes sense for them to do at this point.
So what about, we can't use Vermont? I mean, all of our children together in Vermont don't add up to that many children in a lot of large cities. So why can't we use the entire state as a district and go that route?
So for the community eligible, and again, any school can do universal school meals through provision 2, but for the community eligibility provision statewide, we do not have 40% of students who are directly certified for free school meals, which means their families participate in 3 Squares Vermont, Head Start, and a couple of other options there, which is different than the families filling out the percentage of families who filled out a school meal application and qualify for free or reduced price meals. We just don't, there aren't the numbers of students in that way who qualify. And that's where, you run into the reason why universal school meals is so powerful is that we have 42% of food insecure children who are not eligible for 3 Squares Vermont or free school meals. Their incomes are too high. So they won't qualify for free school meals by filling out the application or by getting directly certified. They only gain access to school meals by moving to a universal model. We run into the problem where the federal poverty line doesn't actually really match the experience of living in poverty and not being able to make ends meet.
So the 40% that Brianna's talking about is not a statewide average then?
I'll try to provide some clarity as well. So it is the statewide average of the families who are able to fill out the free and reduced price meal form at the beginning of the school year and prove that they are 185% and below the poverty line. So that's different than the students who are directly certified that just automatically enroll because they're in 3 Squares Vermont. And looking at that data, that's about 25% statewide. So that's the difference that we're seeing there.
Yeah. Now I follow you. And what about how many, like in Burlington, some schools in that district qualify and other schools in that district don't qualify?
Yes, the Agency of Education has the full list that's updated every year for which schools do qualify for any of these provisions.
And could I ask Rosie, because this gets further complicated. I know where my kids go to school, they don't have universal lunch, but they do universal breakfast already. And so I don't know if that's a district decision to invest in breakfast, or there's a different federal qualification that allows them to do it for breakfast but not lunch. Could you help us understand that?
Yeah, it's a district decision. They've decided that that's worth doing, just like you might decide that it's worth doing at the state level. And they found that the cost, because breakfast is so inexpensive to provide, and because, I was mentioning before, you don't end up having as many affluent students taking advantage of the free breakfast as you do the students who do qualify for free and reduced meals. It just, the math works out a little bit better. And I missed the first part of Brianna's testimony, but one thing that she's getting at is that when you make just breakfast free, you still have the incentive for households to return the school meals application. So you don't drop to that most extreme end of the cost, or you don't, I guess, increase to the most extreme end of that cost spectrum, because we assume that most households who are already submitting free and reduced meal applications will continue to do that. We won't lose those folks. So those folks between the 25% who qualify automatically and the 42%, that difference, the 42% who have to submit the applications. So it's better numbers wise for that reason as well.
Yep.
Brianna, I'm sorry, I missed what the actual estimate ended up being.
Yes, I can say that again. So for the new cost to provide these breakfasts for the students that aren't already receiving them, I came up with between 6 and 10 million, depending on the participation, 60% on the average and all students on the high end.
So that tracks somewhat with your numbers, Rosie, pretty well.
Yeah, to get to my number, I had just taken the total quote that Brianna had given and divided it by the percentage of the breakfast cost. So that makes more sense that with all those nuances, she would have come in under that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there a bunch of schools like Burlington that are doing universal breakfast but not lunch or meals more broadly?
There are some. And I think we have a list. It's a step that I encourage folks to take if they kind of want to dip a toe in the water of universal meals. As I've said, you do get a lot of the benefits of universal meals for it, and it's not as big an investment. I want to tell you that Maple Run does this, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But we do have a list. Oh, Faye will know.
I could screen share a list too, if that's helpful. We do have a list of the schools that are providing breakfast only. One thing I will just note, while it's a way to dip the toes in the water, there are some schools, and Burlington's a good example, who have been doing universal school breakfast for many, many years and have not moved to universal school lunch. So it's not necessarily an on-ramp for going to full universal school meals. Schools can often just stay there because it's a more affordable way and it increases breakfast participation, which is the program that generally struggles with participation more. But I have a list. I'm happy to share it, but there are 21 schools in the 2019-2020 school year that served breakfast only using provision 2.
I should add to what Faye said. Burlington, though, did plan, and of course COVID kind of screwed things up, but did plan to actually add provision 2 breakfast this year. So it was a very long on-ramp of 10 or 15 years, but they did decide. And one thing that you might find is that for the folks who are already doing it, having the state contribute to those the breakfast that they're already doing might allow them to jump up to lunch.
Yeah.
You said Burlington was going to do breakfast, but did you mean shift to lunch?
I did mean that. Yeah, they plan to add lunch this year. Thanks for that.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if they were going to do that move to it, wasn't that going to be part of their school budget then? The extra cost? So any school that decided to institute a lunch program, how else would they do it if the school board voted to go to universal meals? It would just get added right into their budget at the schoolhouse, their school budget. And there isn't anything that prevents them, is there, at the present time from doing that?
No, anybody can do it now. I think the difference that you're talking about is mandating that they do it. So right now they can make the decision that they want to do that. But you're saying that you'd like to force them to do it. And that's where you're getting the pushback, I think, from some folks at the local level.
I will note that a number of the schools that are providing breakfast only universal were providing universal school breakfast and lunch through the community eligibility provision, but lost eligibility when Three Squares Vermont participation started to decline prior to the pandemic. And so they voted to maintain school breakfast because that was what felt affordable for the school, and they wanted to try to maintain some form of universal. They could have kept the whole thing, and some did. We worked really hard with a lot of the schools to help them keep full universal school meals. But so a number of these schools, particularly folks in Orleans and North Country and some of the supervisory unions in the northeastern part of the state, had been providing full universal school meals, and this is where their school budget and school boards landed.
So, Faye, have you ever taken 6 schools that do universal meals and 6 schools of similar size and whatever that don't offer universal meals, and figured out the difference in the per pupil cost of those those districts? Because I can't believe that there's a major difference in the overall per student cost between a school that offers universal meals and is paid for by the district than a district that doesn't do universal meals but we don't have any numbers to show people. I know up north here, we have universal meals at quite a few of our schools, and I don't believe their cost per pupil is a heck of a lot different than the other schools within the district that don't offer it.
So we haven't done that exact kind of analysis. But what I will say is that, the intent behind moving toward a full state universal school meals program, like we're talking about with S100, is that the schools who've already made the decision to invest at their school budget level to move to universal school meals, for the most part, are schools with higher rates of low-income students. So the program is more affordable for their school budget to run. It's the cost of moving to universal school meals is really different in each school district and school. And that's where, the intent behind paying for universal school meals collectively across the state off the top of the ed fund came, so that it's the cost is spread out more, because it is really dependent on the school and how much it's going to cost them. The schools that still have to move to universal school meals will be schools where it is more expensive to go. So that's where, you can't say it costs the first 25% of schools X amount, and so it'll cost the next 25% of schools X amount. It makes it really challenging to compare school to school because of the way that the federal formulas work. And if we could simplify all of the federal formulas in the federal program and just have one program, that's where we all want to be. I really do recognize that this is complicated and frustrating to try to navigate. And
So I've got a question. For those districts that already offer universal meals, if this were to become a statewide plan, their life wouldn't change at all. They wouldn't see an increase in property taxes, nor would they see a decrease. Is that correct?
depends how the program is funded. So if S100 were to remain as it is now, where the increased cost of universal school meals is borne by individual school districts, then those schools would not see any impact in terms of their property tax or their costs. They've already made that investment. They're already bearing the cost by their school district.
But they also wouldn't see any decrease.
Right, they would gain no benefit, or it wouldn't impact them. They've already done what the bill would require them to do. If the increased cost were covered off of the top of the education fund, in the per plate reimbursement model that Jim had put together, they would see some benefit. They would be rewarded for having gone there, and that their increased cost would move to off the top of the education fund and out of their school budget. So it would help at the school budget level, and then their increased cost would join the increased cost of other schools as they move on to be paid for collectively by the full state. So it would impact them in two ways. It would help their school budget, and we don't really know fully when it moves, if it were to move off the top, exactly how the tax increase, the tax structure would shift given the different pieces of the education fund. But it would be incorporated, part of what's in their school budget now would move to off the top of the education fund.
I think I understand.
Jim?
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that while you were deliberating, I drafted an amendment that there's three things that I could share with you if you want. It adds back your locally produced food provisions. It makes universal breakfast available, not lunch. And it sets a goal of having universal lunches by 2026. So I've got language prepared. If you want to go through it, if that's premature, of course, that's fine too.
Well, I think, Chris,
If it's up to me, I would wait for tomorrow. I think the concept we understand, but I'd like to be able to talk to a few colleagues. Just, I'm not worried about the language. The concept is the important thing, and we're getting clear on that. But anyway,
Anthony?
Yeah, I would just agree with Chris. I think that given the conversations we're having and sort of the unknowns about what Jane meant about the general fund and those other questions are still kind of floating around. So I appreciate what Jim's done, and I think that may end up being where we end up, but I don't think we want to end up there quite yet. I think that we want to make sure that the doors aren't closed to the other option that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground. I don't know how far we got though. I mean, seems like we move ahead a step and back a step and sometimes two. But this is, it's a very important issue. For many reasons, and it's certainly an issue that we heard an awful lot about during last year, during the COVID cases and people going hungry and golly, we need to address it. That's for sure. And we are, and Ed is pretty busy, I guess. Brian is, and he, said, well, keep working on it. We got to get this done. And so once we get something, we could let them look at it or even have a joint meeting with them when we got something solid enough to present. And then if our two committees go and talk to approach on any money, that's 11 of us instead of just five Aggies that we should be dealing with the damn local foods issue and trying to get those into the schools, not setting up the whole program for universal meals. But if we have to do it, we'll I like doing this because I think it's really important. So we want to make sure and talk with your colleagues over, while we're doing our afternoon meetings, and I'll certainly meet with Jane, and then we'll have a caucus this evening. You have yours, Brian, tomorrow morning, right?
Friday.
And so you can talk with your members, and
On
then
Friday
we'll.
morning. Yeah.
Pardon?
On Friday morning,
Oh,
yeah.
Friday morning, not tomorrow then.
No.
Maybe you've only got 5 to check in with.
That's true. We
You
could do it
take
that way too.
You take 2.5 and Corey can take 2.5. And that means you both gang up on one of them.
We'll work it out.
Yeah,
Richie.
okay. And so we'll meet up tomorrow morning, and hopefully we have some information so we can move forward. So I want to thank Brianna and Rosie and Faye and Jim. Thanks a lot for hanging in there with us. A whole different crew, us farmers, compared to those education people, huh?
I say so.
So anyways.
Can I ask Senator Starr, would you like us back tomorrow?
Well, I hate to keep bothering you all, but I think for our interest and your own interest, if you can come, that would be good, Rosie, and then we don't have to keep bothering you.
I want to make sure that whatever you pass is something that I can implement. So I
Right.
appreciate the chance to be here.
You're always welcome, and So no, certainly, if you can be with us, it would be appreciated. Same with you, Faye and Brianna. So,
Yep, I'd be
thank,
happy to.
yeah.
No problem.
Well, maybe that apple tree that we planted is gonna have some apples, but you don't know if you don't get it in the ground right. So anyways, thanks a lot, folks, and in committee, and we'll pick up in the morning